Hello, welcome to the September 6th, 2 p.m. virtual community meeting for the Cameron Peak Fire. This afternoon, we have 4 speakers for you. We have Russ Long, Operations Section Chief with the Portland Nemo team for a situation update. We have Katie Donahue, District Ranger from the Canyon Lakes Ranger District on the Arapahoe Roosevelt National Forest. We have Sheriff Justin Smith with the Larimer County Sheriff's Office. And we have Incident Commander B. Day with the Portland Nemo team. My name's Brant Porter, Public Information Officer for the Cameron Peak Fire. We're gonna have our speakers. They all have brief presentations to give everybody an update on what's going on the fire and around the fire. And then we'll have a brief question and answer period afterwards. And that's gonna be compiled from the questions that have been coming in throughout the day. And we'll have folks that are feeding those in to us here, and we'll be asking those of the speakers. Thank you again for joining. And without further ado, Russ Long, Operations Section Chief.
Okay, I'm going to update you on the current situation with the fire and what's been going on over the last 24 and 48 hours. Very busy. So the set of weather conditions that we're experiencing right now are really on the upper limits of the forecast. We've got very low humidities. We have strong wind, very dry fuels, and that all has accelerated the fire behavior. Yesterday's weather, let's set this down here. Yesterday's weather, the fire got active in a couple different locations, but just south of Sleeping Elephant and out towards Grass Lake, the fire in a continuous fuel bed, as we expected it might do, which it did, got active in the afternoon in the crowns of the spruce and the dead snags, and we had continuous crown fire that ran out to the east along the Crown Point Road. Because of that, we pulled our resources and withdrew them as they were building an indirect line to try to tie up into the high country where a line we could burn from. We all had to pull everybody out for personnel safety, and since then the fire has overtaken that area they were working. They all exited safely out the Crown Point Road back to our primary lines. North of Highway 14, we still have a fair amount of activity up off of Green Ridge. That fire is south of Boston Point. The fire, because of the northwest wind, we don't have a large amount of growth on the top end of the fire right here. So that's helping hold it, blowing it back into itself, if you will, and back across Highway 14. The major part of the growth is currently out in the wilderness, in the Comanche wilderness. And then a large finger that ran southeast into Rocky Mountain National Park. That would be north of a long draw. So 4 major areas of activity on the fire. Just a little bit ago, got an update from Air Attack flying over the fire. We have aerial reconnaissance circling over the top, talking to the ground resources. And currently we have about a 3-mile wide head fire, crown fire, burning easterly towards the Pingree Park Road. We think it's going to come to the road somewhere just south of Jack's Gulch. So we currently have, and this is one of our primary lines, our resources doing structure protection, setting up on the homes, doing increased cutting around the values in there, preparing for the fire to come to the road. So one of the good things about where it is coming is that on the other side of the road is the burn scar from 2012 from the High Park fire, which is less conducive to large fire growth because the large fuel bed's already been burned. It will carry fire in places, but not like the other side. So we also are set up down here at the CSU Mountain Campus in Pingree Park. We expect the fire to reach there during today or tonight's shift as well. So we've got a very difficult set of conditions that we're dealing with. All of our aircraft, one of the questions we'll get is, are we running retardant? What are you doing with the helicopters? So all of our helicopters are grounded right now. The wind is too strong. We can't fly in that wind and with the smoke. Retardant is not an option right now. The flame lengths are too high for it to be effective to do anything. So those assets are off the table until we get a different weather and something we can deal with. We do have, though, aerial reconnaissance that has infrared, and they can see through the smoke and are in direct contact with the ground forces to let them know where the flame front is, and provides us a level of safety, and more than that, a level of accuracy for us where we can set up and know that it's coming to one of our primary lines for us to defend it. We currently have resources set up on our primary lines up near the Dead Man Road, down around the communities on the north end, and also down on the Buckhorn Road below. So that is kind of where we're at right now. It's going to be a dynamic day and night. We have a thermal belt that set up last night over the fire. And what that means is there's a warm area between the inversion and the sky where it stays warm and dry, and the fire stays very active up in the upper ridges. So that doesn't work in our favor, because then the fire doesn't fire activity doesn't drop off at night and go to sleep when people do. So it burns through the night and continues to advance. And that allowed spot fires to continue to advance. And they were going out several hundred yards, maybe a quarter, and even a half a mile ahead, advancing that flame front towards the east. So that's where we are right now. It's very difficult conditions. It's a dangerous fire. The fire behavior is characterized as extreme, and that is a fair characterization for what we're experiencing today and yesterday on this incident, and what we expect to have on the fire tomorrow. So that's an update for you where we are right now.
Thank you, Russ. Next up is Sheriff Justin Smith with Laramie County Sheriff's Office.
Thank you. Just a quick update. I actually just got back down from the Dead Man Tower. Based on the behavior that we had yesterday, I know everybody's aware of, they saw plenty of the pictures of that extreme fire behavior and how that really got up late yesterday afternoon, and anybody who was in that Redfeather area saw a lot of flame up there. So I wanted to get up and got to the Dead Man Tower. I am pleased to say that as of the time I left a couple hours ago, that it was not pushing to the north as we had feared, which is what got us to do the voluntary evacuations. That was a big piece that was an addition for us, was voluntary evacuations for all of Redfeather Lakes and the Crystal subdivision up there, Crystal Lakes. And so that is still voluntary at this point. If fire behavior changes and pushes more to the north, and now it's not pushing that direction, that certainly could go to a mandatory. And so everybody's aware. What we're asking with that is for residents that are up there, this is the time to get stuff together. Get your things, get it ready to get out, or go ahead and get stuff out. There's going to be, that's a better way to do it. Beyond that, anybody that doesn't have a place to, if they're not a property owner, we are stopping folks at Boy Scout Ranch Road and 74E or the Redfeather Lakes Road. So no other traffic in. What we want is for the residents to have the least amount of problems and extra traffic in there. So we're working on that. That's a bit of a change. Obviously from yesterday, you saw as it affects property owners and residents, we really just we had to pull back everything that we had been able to gain for folks on Thursday at about noon. When we moved it back up on Highway 14, we were able to get folks up all the way to just below the fish hatchery. We had to move that all the way back down, find my point here, to Kelly Flats, just below Rustic. So no traffic in beyond that point. That's a safe turnaround area. And so everything up in that area is in very active fire zone right now. As well, when you go up the Manhattan Road on that lower part, we're keeping folks out of there because, again, that fire could get, it's moved beyond where it's showing here. It definitely could get into that area. So that is a concern for us. And as a reminder, forest closure in this area, and nobody is to be in that area. It's a very dangerous zone. It did not change anything over on the Laramie River Valley Road. We're still at Stub Creek there. However, everything along Pingree Park as of Yesterday, we had to go ahead and move those back into mandatory evacuations. Obviously, from what Russ shared with us, that's easy to understand. That area is an imminent threat right now. We also had to back from voluntary to mandatory. And let me step back here. Everything else down 44H up over Pennock Pass, dropping all the way down to County Road 27 on this end, down to the Buckhorn. So everything on 44 is in the process of being evacuated. Risk Canyon Fire Department is assisting us with that. Also Old Flowers Road, getting everybody back out of that area if anybody's in there. The Sheriff's Office has been working on the notifications for Crystal and Redfeather. We have nothing at this point that's impacting anyone in Glacier View or those areas. So no changes there. But based on the fire behavior that Russ was describing, the next areas that are concerned, and these are not going into voluntary evacuations yet, but we are asking people to be prepared, is the Dunraven Glade area when you drop back down out of Estes Park and Glen Haven area, because the way they predict the fire was it would come down this direction. So residents in Dunraven Glade, the retreat area back there, we're going to ask you to start putting that plan together. You're not in voluntary evacuations at this point, but this is the time if you got property to be prepared for that. So folks in that area, and also if you're anywhere on County Road 43 in Glen Haven, all the way to the bottom of the switchbacks towards Estes. Again, that's a ways out, but this is an area I'm going to tell you to be prepared, because based on the fire behavior, if it changes and goes north, that's different. But as it's coming south, it certainly shows the indication the fire folks are telling us for those areas to beware. So we're working that. Jumping back up, I failed to mention also, not in any sort of an evacuation, but in the discussions right now is everybody in the Stratton Park area. I hate to bring that up. That's everybody knows that's part of the High Park burn area, but there is the potential as it's moved down, and we're looking at it potentially coming up over all the way down to Stove Prairie potentially, that anybody in that area of Stratton Park needs to be prepared, needs to have plans as well. And it was my understanding from our folks coming in that for anybody in that Estes area going up to Rocky Mountain National Park, either have or they're discussing potential of some closure of Trail Ridge Road at the top because of smoke that's coming through. And I believe that covers all those areas. And again, just to remind folks, this is why we started with the credentialing over a week ago, because folks get backed up coming in if they don't have credentials, and we're trying to verify who belongs in these pre-evac areas or these voluntary evacuation areas like Redfeather, Crystal. Be aware if you go up there, there's some significant waits right now because we're trying to measure getting people in and out and verifying. And please be patient if you're stuck at that traffic waypoint, because what we're trying to do is make sure others that have no business there aren't getting up to where your property is. So now is the time to continue to work on those. And with that, I'm going to turn it back over to the team.
Thank you, Sheriff. Now we'll have Katie Donahue, District Ranger for the Canyon Lakes Ranger District on the Arapahoe and Roosevelt National Forest and Pawnee National Grassland.
I just want to echo what Sheriff Smith had to say and just focus a little bit on National Forest land. First, I know this is a holiday weekend, and I really, really appreciate all the folks that have stayed home or have chosen to go somewhere else this weekend. That really helps us improve our safety outcomes and keep the firefighters and the sheriff's deputies and all the folks that are working out there safe, because there's less traffic. That being said, it's my understanding that even today on Sunday, we're seeing lots of campers still heading west out of town. So I'm here to just express again that we would really like for folks to stay home or find a different place to recreate. As the fire behavior has been up at the extreme end and has moved southeast, we are probably looking at some additional closures, similar to how the Sheriff's Department is looking at potential new areas to prepare folks for what might happen with their homes. We very much want to be a part of that as well in terms of forest recreation. It's very much our priority to make sure that recreationists don't interfere with their ability to get residents in and out of a place or have firefighters working. So at this point, I don't have any changes to announce, but we are looking at them. So I want you to take a look at the website later today and keep an eye on that. And if you're making travel plans, just hold off or start looking farther afield because this really isn't the place where you're wanting to be recreating. I believe Darla Seidels is available to answer questions, and she's not here to speak, so I'll just say up front that there have been some changes to the closures in Rocky Mountain National Park today. So we ask you to go look at those as well, because it will impact a lot of folks' weekend use. I know that a lot of folks, this is kind of the end of the summer, you know, real cap on recreation season, and we understand that inconvenience. But again, we're doing all of this to make sure that the folks that are up there fighting the fire are able to be safe and to do that work without having to worry about keeping other folks safe beyond just the job that they're there to do. Thank you.
Thanks, Katie. Next is Incident Commander B. Day with Portland Nemo Team.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for being on this call. I think it's important to know that these are certainly dire times the next several days with the fire activity that we have on the mountain. And our commitment to the community is to give you the most accurate information, timely information as we work through the next several days. And even beyond the next several days, we're gonna be in the middle of some wild temperature swings, and what we want to do is just give you the best information as we can. I do want to recognize Sheriff Smith's department. We are well coordinated with them, and they have given us assistance in moving people out safely. That is part of my delegation in to keep people safe and also to keep the firefighters safe as we go through the next several days. So thank you. If you have any questions, please reach out to us and we'll provide the information as we can. Thanks.
Thank you, B. As Katie mentioned, we do have Darla Seidels, the superintendent of Rocky Mountain National Park, joining us via Zoom. And she'll be available to answer questions that come in pertaining to Rocky Mountain National Park. We've collected some questions throughout the day today, and I'll be reading those, and we'll direct those to the speakers. And with that, the first question up goes to possibly either the sheriff or to Forest Service. Will you evacuate campgrounds around Redfeather Lakes if Redfeather Lakes goes into mandatory evacuations? And also the second part of that is, will part-timers be required to leave so full-timers have access to the one road?
Do you want to talk on the campgrounds
Sure.
first, Katie?
Yeah. So at this time, we've got two campgrounds up in that Redfeather area, Dowdy Lake and West Lake. And right now, just like the residents, we have not evacuated anyone. Those will be coordinated actions. If people don't want to stay because of the conditions and they're concerned, that they absolutely, you can head home. We're not holding anybody in their campsites if they would like to go. But at this point, we're not asking people to move out because the fire behavior hasn't pushed us to do so. That being said, we ask people in the campgrounds to be prepared, and we're communicating with the hosts so that we will notify you if it comes to that point. And we'll certainly do that in coordination if we're moving into mandatory evacuations for the communities.
On the areas questioning about Redfeather and Crystal Lakes as far as residents, this is the point in time that anybody who's a property owner, whether they're full-time or part-time, if they haven't, we ask them to get up and take care of things that need to be taken care of. Once we go into mandatory, there is no getting back into the area. That's the point. We're getting the imminent point, and we're advising folks they do all need to get out. Now, when we go into those evacuations, we continue to maintain security points and best we can, patrol those areas as well, because a big part of our job is to do everything we can to help you protect your property from issues beyond the fire as well. So it doesn't matter if you're part-time or full-time. It's the same as once we go into mandatory, we're asking or advising everyone to get out of that area as soon as possible.
So the next question is for Russ. And the question specifically asks about the status of the Kilpecker line that was nearing completion today. And also, in addition to that, the efforts that were going on down in this area off the Crown Point Road.
Okay, so the Kilpecker line up on north of Highway 14. So that is being improved. It's complete, but they continue to improve that line. So they'll get the initial line in. It's basically a connection of roads and dozer lines to straighten out corners. Corners are difficult for us to work with. We like to have straight lines. So that line we're considering it an alternate line that we may use primarily. And so what that means is we have this primary line on the outside. And once we've had an opportunity to, we went inside to get closer to the fire. Now, if we have the ability to use that, if the fire comes up and presents itself, we will. If we're not able to, we have another line of defense that we can fall back to that's even wider. So that answers that question about that. We have also improved around the tower. We've widened the vegetation around there to keep it safe with that, all the communication assets there that are so important. The other question was the line inside the Comanche Wilderness that we were working, is that right? Off of the Crown Point Road. To answer your question, the Crown Point Road, we'd improved it. You know, it's not the best place in the world to fight fire from. It's mid-slope in many places and has some disadvantages to it. However, it existed, and we were able to come off of that into the Comanche Wilderness. Well, that line is no longer valid because the fire has outran us there, and we withdrew all of our resources for safety, and there was no way to hold that line. So in previous town halls here or Facebook meetings, we talked about and showed the fuels that were in there, the density of the dead trees and the density of the live trees. And with those, the spotting across the line with the westerly wind makes it impossible for us to hold those lines. So we've retreated from that, and we are back on our primary line, which is the Pingree Park Road, and that is where we're going to make a stand, and that will happen this afternoon.
Thank you, Russ. And the next question is for Rocky Mountain National Park. So it appears that the fire has made it into the north boundary of Rocky Mountain National Park. Knowing the area well, the fire seems to be accessing a valley that has timbered ridge lines that run towards the Mirror Lake area. First, is that correct? And also, what is the plan to keep the fire out of the heart of the park?
Okay, can y'all hear me? Can y'all hear me now?
Go ahead, Darla.
Okay, so yeah, the fire came into the park about maybe 6:00 p.m. last night, and it's up in that northwestern corner of the park. Definitely near that Mirror Lake. Are we okay with sound?
Yeah.
I'm hearing echoes.
It's
Okay,
getting feedback.
So while we're getting some audio issues sorted out with Rocky Mountain National Park, we have some questions about what the next steps as far as evacuation orders, as far as evacuation zones east of the area are. Some folks are curious about Glacier View and some of those areas. You mentioned a couple of those areas, but folks seem to be wanting to get prepared for things that may be next and places that may go into voluntary evacuation next. Could you share a little bit, Sheriff, about the next zones that are being considered for those things or where those zones are? Thank you.
So again, the areas that you talk about Glacier View, we are not, we do not have current plans to put them on voluntary evacuations. However, if you live anywhere up along 74, I would say anything from McNay Hill up, absolutely, this is a good time, make those plans, get things around there, get moved off your property. There's trailers, there's campers, there's things. I would encourage you, those large things, to go ahead if you can find a place to move those and have your other critical things put together. But at this time, we do not have specific plans to go pre-evacuate up there, or excuse me, voluntary evacuation up there. The other area that I'll reiterate was the Stratton Park area, back down in the old High Park burn area just across County Road 27. And with that, I failed to mention when I was up here before, that also means everything on Highway 14 down to Stowe Prairie Road or County Road 27 would be in that evacuation zone as well. We're not planning to go lower than that at this point, but definitely to 27. So if you're, again, if you're in the area that's on the other side of 44H down to County Road 27, the Buckhorn down, Old Flowers, that is in the newest zone for evacuation. So we're moving through that with the assistance of Risk Canyon Fire Department. So those areas, honestly, the weather right now with what we're seeing gives us a little less concern, not that we're not concerned, a little less concerned with the areas up here today compared to where yesterday was, but we still have some time before that cool down. So don't get lulled into being a little lackadaisical there. But again, the other areas to be concerned with are going down towards Glen Haven. So if you know where the retreat is and where Dunraven Glade is, not on a voluntary evacuation, but again, it's an area to, if you're anywhere along that area, be prepared for that. And again, the potential all the way Glen Haven to the bottom of the switchback. So those are the main areas. Everything else has already been covered. Redfeather and Crystal, we're going to leave on voluntary. Could change, but we're not seeing it with the current weather right now. So those really are the areas. We don't see anything else that's immediate in here with Sand Creek or the areas along Pearl Beaver. And, obviously recreation, those roads are closed, but we don't see anything on Prairie Divide right now that's concerning us. And at this point, Laramie River Valley is not a significant concern in the big picture. So I don't see anything changing here. Nothing here right now. We're keeping an eye on this area. This one's not jumping, but down here, because based on what we've seen of the fire and what folks are telling us in the forecast, it's that more southerly area that we need to be concerned about. So hopefully that answers those questions.
Thank you, sir. So we're going to try to get an answer to that question regarding the fire moving into the north boundary of Rocky Mountain National Park with those audio issues that we were having. I'm going to read the question again or paraphrase the question again. And District Ranger Katie Donahue is going to help us out in getting that response from the Superintendent Seidels. So it seems as though the fires made it into the northern boundary of Rocky Mountain National Park. It seemed, knowing the area well, it seems like that it's in a valley and could run upstream, and there are timbered ridge lines that run past the Mirror Lake area into the heart of the park. What actions are planned to keep the fire from becoming established in the interior of the park?
Okay, Darla, so we're going to try to relay what you have to say if we can make this work. This is modern technology, you guys. We're doing our best.
Yes, and thanks everybody for your patience as I'm calling in remotely from Estes Park. So far, so good?
Say that one more time. I'm actually holding the phone to my ear now.
Okay, I just said thanks for everyone's patience as I'm calling in remotely from Estes Park.
Thanking everyone for patience. She's calling in from Estes Park.
Okay, so yes, there's a couple of places that the fire could come into the park.
There's a couple of ways that the fire could move further into Rocky Mountain National Park.
And as you all have heard, it came into the park last night, late afternoon.
And as you all heard, it did come into the park late afternoon yesterday.
One of the more likely paths that it could come into the park at this point is toward Chapin Pass, which if you've been on Old Fall River Road, you're familiar with that area.
Okay. So one of the ways that it could come into the park or through the park is across Chapin Pass. And if you've been up Old Fall River Road, you're probably familiar with that area.
That is why we made the decision to close Old Fall River Road last night and are closing Trail Road today at 3 o'clock.
Okay, they're hearing you direct, so that's awesome. I'm gonna let you just keep talking.
Great, this is so much easier. So yes, this is why we made the decision to close the Old Fall River Road last night, and we will be closing the Trail Ridge Road today in about 25 minutes at 3 o'clock. In particular, Trail Ridge Road is going to be closed because of the potential for smoke from the fire. And that if you've been up there above tree line and know how narrow that road is with direct drop-offs, our greatest concern for Trail River Road is Trail Ridge Road is just the visibility and the smoke. So with those two closures, it gives us a chance to do a little scouting to look for some opportunities to hold it near that Chapin Pass area. The second place, as Sheriff Smith has mentioned, that it could come into the park is over there to the southeast of Pingaree Park. So we're looking at that area as well. No exact strategies at this point, just looking at our options and very closely following the weather and the winds and the pattern as it goes forward for the next day to see what the likelihood of it is to actually make it to any of those spots.
Thank you, Darla. The next question is for Russ. There are lots of questions about the Highway 14 corridor and several points within that. One is current status of the fire as it's making its way up Highway 14. The second is the structure protection actions that are ongoing in there. And also if we've had any reports of lost structures to date along Highway 14.
Yeah, okay. So good questions. Of course, everything's dynamic. No structure loss along Highway 14. Nothing there. We have had active structure protection all the way up here around the CDOT yard. I might get the name wrong, so forgive me if I do it, but there's a mercantile lodge there, little store, bunch of cabins, all in great shape. On the north side of the highway, firefighters continue to prep and burn around structures. Now, when we get up to Kinnicknick around the Big Bend, that's an area of concern for us, as that we have a northwest wind right now that's restricting that fire from basically, I'll say, getting off the leash. Right now, it really can't. It's once burned back towards itself, towards the canyon rim. Once we get around here, it's going to be under a different influence, and our models and our belief is it will likely accelerate. So this northwest wind is really helping the effort on this side, the north side here. The question was around structure protection. Where was that, Brent?
Are the structure protection groups still in there actively protecting structures? And another part of that question was the status of like sprinklers and pumps and all that sort of thing along that stretch all the way down to Rustic.
So what we did was we reallocate resources to the highest priority, and we reset priorities through the day, not just one time in the morning or one time in the evening. Today, after the runs and where the fire predictions were for where the fire to go, we moved resources from very indirect down to direct down to the Pingaree Park area, as this is where we expect the fire to come to first. So we're reinforcing this line with additional resources right in here. They're putting out hose, pumps. We have had pre-positioned, so we have box trucks that we have preloaded with structure protection equipment, with pumps. We call them pumpkins. They're a big fillable tank that we'll put in a driveway and have a water tender or a pump fillet from a creek to hold water. And then we'll lay hose around a structure with the pump. So when the fire comes, if we can stay, we'll stay. If it's time for us to leave also, we will. And we'll turn on the sprinklers if we've turned those on, or if we set those up around a structure. We set up sprinklers that will water the yard, if you will, around the structure. We'll stay there as long as it's safe to do so. And then if we need to leave, we'll turn those on and leave. And once a flame front comes through, come back and then pick up the flames that would be around a structure or put anything out. Oftentimes wood piles will catch fire, and there's things that we can extinguish that will save a house. So that's how that goes right there. That's happening all the way up the Pingree Park Road, up the Highway 14 corridor as the fire approaches. Now, again, the major part of our fire behavior is not in the Highway 14 corridor right now. It's deep in the national forest and the wilderness, working towards the Pingree Park and the piece that's burned out towards Rocky Mountain National Park. And I don't know if I mentioned it, but I talked to, I was getting an update from Air-Attack, talking to one of our other ops chiefs about the fire progress into the park. And at the time, it wasn't really moving out on us yet today. It was holding up in the high tundra and was just kind of checking itself up. So that's great news. That gives us more time so it cannot get down in the drainages and get established. No, I don't have the most recent update. When I leave the room, I'll go back out and find out where things are. But at last report, things weren't moving quickly down on the south end in the national park.
Thanks, Russ. The next question is for the sheriff. We have several folks that are concerned about the upcoming weather and with concerns about filling their propane tanks and that sort of thing, moving into winterizing cabins, that sort of thing. They're curious about having contractors going into the closed areas where it's just residents that are allowed in there to be able to do work. And they were curious if there was a way that they could get contractors in to work on homes to do things like winterization and all that sort of thing in preparation of the amid all the evacuations.
Let me just say again, if folks are outside of the voluntary evacuation zones, absolutely, that there's no restrictions in there. Once we get to those voluntary evacuation zones, we're typically not likely to get contractors in there. We're kind of getting to that point now that we're really trying to work with just residents. So I wouldn't count on being able to get contractors in. My hope is that in the next 36 hours, we'll see enough changes, specifically in Redfeather and Crystal Lakes area, that we may see some changes that would be different for that. However, it's a little late to be promising, and certainly the idea of putting a propane truck up into there right now makes me a bit nervous, I'll be honest. And the other areas that are in mandatories, nobody's getting back into those zones except the emergency personnel. So at this point, if you can get up to your property in the voluntary and do those things, that's certainly great. But contractors are really kind of out right now.
Great, thank you for that response. So one of the questions that we've gotten from several folks, and Russ had to step out for a moment to go support the operations that are out on the ground. One of the questions that we've gotten from lots of folks throughout the region is they're concerned about the ash that's falling throughout the area. Unless that ash that's falling is hot, as long as it's cold ash that's falling from the sky, regardless of the size of it, there's no reason to be concerned. But we've gotten probably a dozen questions asking about concern over the ash. If you are seeing, hot ash falling and embers and that sort of thing, and you are in close proximity to the fire, that is reason for concern. But from most of the folks that are across the Front Range that are experiencing ash from this, there's really no reason for concern for that. The next question is going to be back to the sheriff. Folks are asking, I'm sorry, I lost my spot here while I stepped away. So B, we have for Incident Commander B Day, we have a question asking if the incident has found housing for firefighters during the upcoming frigid weather that's expected.
Yeah, that's a great question. And we are currently looking at options to provide shelter or additional shelter for the firefighters. Our logistics people are hard at that, and I don't have a specific answer as far as location, but it certainly has been on our mind to provide any sort of additional shelter for the firefighters. So, but great question and certainly a concern of ours.
Thank you. And the next question is for Superintendent Seidels. We did have a couple folks with all the audio things that we had going on to ask that you repeat the areas that are closed within Rocky Mountain National Park. I think we kind of stepped on each other a little bit there. And if you don't mind just running through those couple of places, that would be really helpful.
You bet. So as of last night, we closed the Old Fall River Road. And as of 3 o'clock today, in about 15 minutes, Trail Ridge Road will be closed. We've also closed some of our wilderness campsites and a few of the trails in the far northeast corner of the park. And those are kind of directly west of the Glen Haven area, out of the North Fork Trailhead area. So those are the three area closures in addition to the closure that we had prior to today.
Thank you, Darla. The next question that we have is for Operations Section Chief Russ Long. And Russ, earlier when you were talking about the Pingree Park area, you said that you guys were getting in a position to be able to make a stand against the fire. We have some folks that are asking specifically what make a stand means and what you guys are planning to do in Pingree Park.
Right. So, well, it's football season, so I could probably use this. It's like 4th and 2 when you're on the goal line and you're on defense. That's kind of like what it is right there. So those of you that miss football would understand. So we'll rally more resources. We're going to bring more engines. We're going to bring more resources to bear. We're going to set up more equipment. And if it's safe to be there and do so, then we will make a stand. And that means that as the fire comes, we may burn out. And that's unlikely under weather conditions like this, because we don't want to add to the add fire to something that's always already highly volatile, but be ready to suppress and catch spot fires as it hits our control line. So that's what make a stand would mean when we talk about that in fire terms.
So the next question is regarding sheltering locations for the Glen Haven area in County Road 43.
At this point, we don't have any evacuation shelters that I'm aware of set up for the folks in that area because we're not to that point. I would encourage you looking for that information to watch for that to come up would be through larimer.org, the main page for the county, and the Cameron Peak Fire is listed at the top. That will take you to the page for the Emergency Operations Center, and it'll give you the phone numbers to call, or it'll share that information. For folks in the other areas, the initial gathering point we had was Cache La Poudre Middle School. Obviously, that's up on the north end. If it gets down to that area, I would look for that to be somewhere in the Estes area. It just has not been laid out. But as soon as something like that were to be decided or necessary, you would see that. And typically we go into the Estes Park area for folks within that region.
And Sheriff, another question for you. Folks are several questions regarding if there's a system in place to notify property owners if their property or structures are affected by the fire.
Great question. What our plans are, we've worked with our fire chiefs, and sadly, we've had experience at structure loss in the past. In a fire of this scale, if we start losing structures, our plan basically is to go back in with our personnel, assess property by property, because throughout High Park and even Woodland Heights, for the folks up in Estes Park, it did not hit every home as it went through the area. So rather than try to give a broad everything's burned out, what we'll do if we end up, unfortunately, in that situation is go through with mapping and document specifically. Our current plan, and we've met with the fire chiefs on the north end of the county, is if we do that to coordinate with them. What we did in the past was try to do it as a neighborhood meeting and walk individuals through. And so they're there, you know, I hate to say it, kind of to support each other if we end up in that unfortunate situation. If it's outside of a fire district, it would be our personnel, but we may have to do some things electronic, we'll see. But if we can do it face-to-face, person-to-person, what we want to do is be able to share with the knowledge we have of what did get destroyed or damaged and what things are still standing. So that's the current plans that we have.
Thank you, sir. Next question is for Russ Long. We have several comments regarding certain places, specifically Crown Point Drive, Bayou Lane, Wester Rustic, Monument Gulch, Pingree Park Road, and places where folks said that sprinklers or pumps weren't present, and we're wondering why and where those are deployed.
So I'll try to explain that for you. And some of the exact geographic names I don't have. For the purposes of our firefighters, we use on our operational maps, we make drop point numbers so they're easy to identify. So, but Rustic's right here. And why is there not hose on some of the structures west of Rustic? So we have a finite amount of resources during preparedness level 5, which is the highest level of activity for all of our resources, both human and our firefighting equipment. Because of that, what we do is, say up here in Highway 14, where we've already successfully protected structures, and we have structure protection in place around Kinnick and down the highway. As we do not need it any longer, we retrieve and reuse the equipment that's already there and move it back down. It's kind of like it goes to the back of the line and gets set up and refurbished and put onto another structure. So there is not enough equipment to equip every single structure with that equipment. So as the fire approaches and as the threat increases towards one, that's where we will re-implement structure protection or add more when it becomes available.
Thanks, Russ. We appreciate it. We have a question regarding, actually, Russ, this is going to be you as well. Question regarding air tanker use, and you did address the winds and the helicopters, but folks are curious about use of air tankers and why we are or why we aren't.
Yeah, we get that question a lot, and sometimes it's difficult to explain and understand, because that's what you see all the time is the air tanker and not the firefighter on the ground that's doing the work. So one of the things that we're very careful about that's super important to us is the water. Retardant and water don't go together. So we are very, very selective about where it goes and have policies about distance from streams. So if there's a question about, say, well, how come we're not putting retardant in the drainage to put the fire out? Well, first off, it doesn't put the fire out. It's a retardant, not a suppressant. Water suppresses a fire. Retardant coats the flammable material and helps stop embers from starting additional fires and coats the vegetation. In order for that to work, we have to have a firefighter and a saw line, a hard hat and a Pulaski, a dozer, the cutting the line and burning it out. And since we can't do that in the country and the fuels back here, we're not going to risk this precious water supply in the Poudre River drainage and the great resources here in the country. And plus it wouldn't do what our brains think it might do. So we use our weather, our fire smarts, and our people to do that. There are places we can do it up on the ridges where it makes sense to do so. But this isn't a place that we can use retardant. Now, we did set up a mobile retardant base up off of the Manhattan Road. And what that is it's a large tanks. We mixed 40,000 gallons this morning so that when we can fly the heavy helicopters, of which we had 4 moving this morning, they'll come and fly to that mobile retardant base. They'll dip their bucket in rather than getting water. And if it's a place that we can use retardant, we will then apply it with preciseness, more like a paintbrush effect, if you would, exactly where we want it, rather than a long strip of retardant around structures. So that's really why we set that up. It's a big operation, requires a lot of resources to operate and to set up, but we did that so that if we do get in the fight around the structures and the wind's not too high, the helicopters can dip into the retardant tanks, fly it to the structure where the firefighters ask for it, and precisely put it around the areas that we want it to defend the values at risk.
Thank you. The next question is for Incident Commander B. Day. Folks are asking, the question specifically is, what can we do to get adequate resources to suppress the fire?
Adequate resources, I would say we have over 600 firefighters on the ground and maybe 600 to 800. And we are the #1 priority within this geographic area. So we are getting the resources that we need out there on the ground, and we feel very confident, at least to give us the best shot with weather conditions that we have. Now, I just want to make you aware that, and I think you probably know, that there are additional fires burning all across the West. And we are, if you will, in competition for those. And California is very active, as well as the Northern Rockies. So we do need to share the amount of resources that we have, because we all have fires like this in their backyard. Everyone's got priorities, and we have to do the best that we can with the resources that we have in place. So great question. I wish that we could get whatever that we want, but in the weather conditions that we have, we would be difficult to obtain our objectives. We're just fighting. We got a lot of difficult situations out there. Thanks.
Thank you. And the next question is for Russ again. And folks are curious about the coming winter weather and what chances, how that may help firefighting efforts, and if that might give us a chance to gain some containment.
So the forecast is for snow. We all hope we get it. Blessing and a curse, because ahead of that cold front, we get a wind shift and strong winds. You're familiar with it here in Colorado. If you don't like the weather, wait 5 minutes. It's going to change. So what will the snow do to the fire? Well, it'll lay it down just like the thunderstorms did, but it's not going to put it out. It would take quite a bit of snow, and our fire behavior could address it probably in more scientific terms. But I'll tell you that having been on the Bobcat fire years ago up in Redfeather Lakes, having been on the Crystal fire years ago, we had snow on it twice, and the fire still got back up and dried out. So it helps us. It gives us more time, but it's not the final answer. We'd have to have repeated storms and have to have it stick around. And then with no threat of it drying out, because here in Colorado, the air is very dry and the wind blows, and it'll evaporate that snow and the moisture off very quickly. And because of the drought conditions and the dryness of the fuel, it takes that much more moisture to make a difference. Here we are, just a week ago, we were having thunder showers over the fire and hopeful that that would give us more time. However, here we are today with fire that's aggressive fire behavior. So yes, it'll help. We can't wait for it to get here. And no, it's not going to put the fire out. It's still going to be firefighters and eventually a season-ending event that will put out all of the fire.
Thanks, Russ. So Sheriff, two questions stemming from the previous question regarding folks and contractors being able to get into their properties and cabins. Specifically, folks, again, are concerned about preventing ruptured water pipes. Can the residents themselves with credentials get to their home in a mandatory evacuation area? Can they get an escort in to do that work?
A good question. At this time with the extreme fire behavior, if we put something in a mandatory zone, it really is that dangerous and we're keeping everybody out but the fire personnel. So at this point, I don't see if we have that in most of those zones, the likelihood of getting in. That's why we encourage folks ahead of time on the voluntary evacuations to go ahead and do that. And as we're talking today about areas that we expect to be in voluntary or anticipate could be, that's the time to do it. And I wish I had better news for you, but we're in mandatory. You're getting to critical areas and it's just simply not safe. And I understand water pipes are a concern. I share that with folks, but you know, the life safety comes before property at this point.
So for those folks that are in follow up on that, so folks that are in the voluntary areas can do work and are welcome to come and go, but the folks that are in the mandatory evacuation areas, those are high risk areas right now, and they should avoid those areas.
Yes, they can get into the voluntaries. One piece I'll add there is if you were credentialed, strongly encourage you to bring those credentials with you. When I came down this afternoon, I know there continues to be a significant line getting up to the Redfeather Glacier View area, or excuse me, Redfeather Crystal Lakes area, because a good number of folks were having to go by individually and figure out if they've got property up there. So if you have that, it makes it faster getting in and out. But
perfect. And last question for you, sir. Folks seem concerned about people turning off their propane tanks if they're in a mandatory evacuation zone. Is there any system set up in the county or anything like that that folks could tap into to get those propane tanks turned off? Is there any help or anything available like that in those areas?
I would encourage you to talk to your local fire district. If you reach out to your fire department, they can coordinate. You know, if it's getting near an area, part of the structure protection that's going on with the structure crews that Russ has available to him is they are dealing with those issues if they get up there. And those tanks are meant to vent. There's reasons that they have offsets on how far a propane tank should be away. But one of the things to remind people is that those are made to vent in a heat situation. But my encouragement, if you're in a fire district up there, would be to talk to those individuals. They might be able to get by and help you with that as well.
Thank you, Sheriff. We've had several questions about Estes Park, and folks are asking about the possibility of future voluntary evacuations and also the direction of fire possibly moving towards that direction. So first off, let's address the matter of fire moving towards in the direction of Estes, and then we'll come around to the rest of that question.
Okay, so the process we use for evacuations is we work with the sheriff's department and all the other authorities, and we determine lines, and they're based on timing. So we have a line on a map, and if the fire reaches it, we have a set of conditions that we set out. So one of them would be if a fire crosses this line, we're going to call the Larimer County Sheriff, and we make a recommendation for a level of evacuation for an area. And then the sheriff takes it from there. So with that, the question is about Estes Park, I believe. So we are currently working on that with the National Park Service and determining where a line would be that we would need to give ourselves enough time to make an evacuation move. We have not recommended that yet, and we currently have personnel that are over there meeting with their fire management staff and the park superintendent, and they're outlining that. So we have process in place. We get ahead of it in order to make good decisions for public safety on that regard. And while I'm up here, I saw a question over here. It was about, had we turned the power off yet on the Highway 14? No, we haven't. I just texted back to the ops room. So the power has not been switched off yet. We are in direct commo with the power company. In the event that the fire does come to the Pingree Park Road, we will request that. We learned today that the switch is right here that goes at Pingree Park, also goes up the 14 corridor. So it's always our intention to leave the power on as long as possible, but for firefighter safety and the risk of electrocution, we have to do that when we're in the structure protection mode, because if a pole burns and a line comes down on the road, the hazards are too great to be there. So as of right now, the power has not been turned off.
Thank you. And our last question for the night is going to go to the sheriff. We've had several questions about the Drake and Storm Mountain areas, and folks that are in those areas that were curious about current and upcoming status for those areas.
A very good question. Storm Mountain and Drake. Nothing at this time. The look at Dunraven Glade and the retreat is certainly off in the distance for us already. And so we have not made any determinations on voluntary evacuations there. This is really just a time to give people a heads up based on our discussions with the fire team and their forecasts of the likelihood of a direction the fire would go based on where it's gone so far, the vegetation and the weather pattern. Move it in that direction. Be aware that we do look. In fact, we have looked since the day this fire started on August 13th at the different directions can go. We build what we call polygons where we're having staff go through and look at the areas. It's not just on maps. In Dunraven Glade in the retreat right now, we actually have some personnel from Boulder County Sheriff's Office that are in there actually going through to help look at that and put those together. No plans in Drake or on Storm Mountain right now, but we're always prepared for the steps beyond or preparing for those. And the same thing goes to the question on Estes Park. There's nothing that brings us to do those now, but to be honest, when we look at that Estes area, that's not off the map for us in a regular season, that we have those discussions about what could happen. And we work not only in the outlying areas outside the town limits, but the town of Estes works on that as well. So if the fire does continue to move that direction, which we hope, some things change before it moves even to the Dunraven Glade area, it's our expectation to formalize those. We kind of take these step by step.
Thank you. And that's all the time that we're going to have for questions today. However, we are going to do one last round with all of our speakers if there's anything that's left to say. First up is Russ Long.
Okay, I just want to assure you that all of our firefighters are working very hard out there and are going to be doing everything we can to protect your national forest, your national park, and your private lands. It's a hard fight and it's dangerous out there, but we will be after it day and night to do that. Also, I want to introduce John Titron. He is my counterpart, Operations Section Chief from the Boise NEMO team. And I'll be heading home for days off tomorrow. I'll be returning on Friday, and John will be with you over the week and giving you updates as things progress. So John, you wanted to introduce you.
Yeah, hi, good afternoon, everyone. I'll look forward to giving you these regular updates and answering your questions as Russ gets some much needed days off, and then he'll be back with us here in the next week. So look forward to the next time we get to talk. Thanks.
Thank you. Are there any closing comments from the Forest Service?
You can stay here. I just want to thank the Rocky Mountain Team Black, as well as the NEMO team and the Sheriff's Office. This is a really complicated fire. It's not an easy situation, and it's been changing every day, and all of you who've been following this know that. And I just want to say how much we appreciate everyone working really closely together to try and have good outcomes and keep people safe. Thanks.
Thank you. I'd just like to add, certainly we understand the concern, some of the frustrations for individuals that may be impacted by this. I know it goes, from folks that are way out there looking at the ash and the smoke and the concerns. And I know from the beginning, there's been a lot of discussions on watersheds, and I'm confident that the NEMO and the other fire folks are looking into those. They understand our long-term needs, and they're keeping that in mind. It does impact some of the strategies that are there to look long-term. But to the residents, we've been through this stuff before. It's difficult. It's tough. We're certainly looking to continue to work alongside you to help protect your properties, protect your things, but also, just be there and support. These are, whether you lose property or not, these are even the forests are very personal to us. And so I know these teams that are out here are fighting for that same goal. It's been a long fight. There's quite a ways ahead. I'm confident in the folks that have come here to help us out. I'm appreciative of everybody that's been mentioned, and there's plenty more that are out there. And together we'll get through this. It's far from over. The next couple of days will test us. They'll test the firefighters. Will test us as a community. Let's hold together. Let's don't do the things we've seen in our country and other places where people have torn at each other. We're going to hold together, and we're going to get through this.
Thank you. And Assistant Commander B-Day.
Well, thanks for those words for everyone. I do want to recognize our production crew. They're working fast and furious to set this up, to provide you the timely information that's so needed. Our intent is to be transparent with what we're doing out on the ground, and appreciate the support as we move through this. It's going to be a long haul, and we know the concern from the community. And as questions come up, please direct those to either the Facebook account so that we can answer your questions. So and I guess one last point is that rumors. When we get into these type of situations, there's a lot of rumors that come that are started. And I will tell you that we take a lot of it takes a lot of energy to try and track that down. And in a time like this, as our focus should be on public safety or firefighter safety, we would just ask that if there's questions, any rumors that we haven't addressed today, please call us, and then we'll get we'll confirm that. So thanks again, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, Assistant Commander Day. That's going to conclude our meeting for the night. One last thing that we want to put out to the community is there's been lots of outpouring of generosity and interest of donations, of hosting firefighters in homes and that sort of thing. And we want to assure everybody that the firefighters are well cared for. We travel with all of the possible needs, the things that anybody could possibly need. The best way that you can help is your support, supporting the firefighters that are out there on the line through kind words, messages of support and that sort of thing. And if you're compelled to do something, to take action or to give something, there are lots of folks that are in these areas that have been affected by this fire already. And pushing that support towards your own community is really the best way that you can help. There are organizations within the community, there are individuals within the community that can use that help much more than we can. So thank you for all of your outpouring of generosity, and we thank you for joining us today.